You ever have one of those mornings when life just walks right up to your front door, looks you dead in the eyes, and says, "Hey, think you've suffered enough? Guess what? Here's more." Yeah. That was the morning everything changed for me, except I didn't know it yet. My name's Jenna Carter, and back then I lived in a creaky little rental on the edge of Willow Ridge, a town big enough to feel lonely but small enough that everyone still remembers if your ex-husband cheated on you with the bartender at Tony's Grill. Trust me, I know. Anyway, that morning, I was standing barefoot on my front step, still in my diner uniform, staring at a bright red eviction notice like it was printed in flashing neon. 30 days. 30 days to pack up my life, my 4-year-old son Liam's toys, and the last pieces of dignity I'd been holding together with duct tape and cheap coffee. Behind me, Liam was inside making his firetruck save all his stuffed animals from the couch. He had no idea our world was dangling by one last, very frayed, thread. I folded the notice, stuck it in my purse with the others, and pretended I could handle one more disaster. But apparently life said, "Oh, you think that's bad? Hold my beer." Because right then, a shadow fell across the porch. A man, tall, sharp suit, the kind of confidence no normal person naturally has, stepped up like he owned the place. And maybe he did. At the time, I couldn't tell. "Ms. Carter," he said, voice smooth and annoyingly sure of itself. Instantly, my guard went up. I moved in front of Liam's toys like I was shielding a castle. "I'm sorry," I said. "Do I know you?" "My name is Daniel Ashford," he replied, like that name alone should have meant something. "We need to talk." He stepped inside before I invited him, red flag number 1, and took in my living room with a glance that felt like an evaluation. Not cruel, just clinical, like he was figuring out how everything fit into some equation only he understood. And then he dropped the bomb. "My family," he said, placing a thick folder on my coffee table, "is owed $3 million by your father." I laughed. Out loud. A short, bitter laugh because my father hadn't been in my life since I was 22, and even before that, he had the financial judgment of a toddler in a casino. "That's not my problem," I said. "It is," he replied calmly, "because he signed a contract stating that if he couldn't pay, custody of repayment transfers to you, through marriage." I froze. Everything inside me just stopped. "Marriage," I whispered. "Like, actual marriage. Legally binding, publicly verifiable, and lasting no less than 1 calendar year." I blinked at him. He might as well have said I owed someone $3 million in toenails. "That's insane," I finally managed. "Nobody does that. That can't be legal." Daniel didn't flinch. "It's legal. And your father verified it himself." Then he did something I will never forget. He put his phone on speaker and dialed a number. And my father, my unreliable, self-destructing father, answered. "Jenna, baby. I'm so sorry," he said, voice tired and broken. "These people, they weren't gonna let me walk away. I had to give them something. Something. Apparently that something was me. I felt sick. I felt betrayed. I felt Liam tug on my pant leg asking if the fancy man was here to fix the TV. And in that moment, all I could think about was keeping my son safe. Daniel's voice softened, almost imperceptibly, when he saw Liam hiding behind me. "You should understand," he said, "I didn't choose this arrangement either. My grandfather did." He sat down, loosened his tie, and for the first time he didn't look like a machine in a suit. He looked trapped. "My inheritance," he explained, "all of it, the company, the assets, my position, everything depends on fulfilling the terms of that contract. If I don't marry you, it all goes to my cousin. And he'd burn Ashford Global to the ground in 6 months. Ashford Global. Hotels, shipping lines, media companies. I'd heard the name but never connected it to a real person. He was that Ashford. "So," I said, forcing myself not to panic, "we're both hostages." Exactly, he said. Our eyes met. For once, neither of us had the upper hand. That was the moment everything shifted. 3 weeks later, after a courthouse wedding with 2 signatures and 0 romance, Liam and I were unpacking in Daniel's penthouse overlooking Silverton City, skyscrapers, glass, the whole postcard view. It felt like I'd stepped into a movie I didn't audition for. Liam, however, walked right in like he owned the place. "Mom," he whispered. "Our house is big enough for 2 Christmas trees." Daniel smiled, a real smile, not the press photo kind, and I caught something vulnerable in his expression. Something careful. Something almost hopeful. Over the next weeks, we built a strange rhythm. Daniel wasn't used to kids, but he tried. I mean really tried. He read bedtime stories in a voice so stiff it made Liam giggle every time. He bought the wrong snack brands 3 times in a row until he understood that my kid would only eat the yogurt with the dinosaur on it, not the astronaut. He once spent 2 hours on the floor assembling a toy fire station only to realize he'd put the decals upside down. But he didn't quit. He didn't complain. And he didn't treat Liam like an inconvenience. Which was more than I could say about certain people from my past. One evening, while Liam was in his room drawing superheroes, I cornered Daniel in the kitchen. "Why are you being so decent about all this?" I asked. He looked at me like he wasn't sure how to answer. "Because," he said quietly, "I don't want this year to be hell for you." We held each other's gaze a moment too long. Something was changing. But life doesn't let you enjoy soft moments for long. Because just when we were starting to find our footing, Liam got sick. Bruises. Fevers. Symptoms no mother ignores. The tests came back with complications, and the doctor mentioned the word that freezes your blood. Cancer. Or at least the possibility of it. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. In that moment, everything, the fake marriage, the money, the contract, the penthouse, felt stupid and meaningless. But Daniel, he stepped up. Not in a performative, billionaire saving the day way. In a raw, terrified, protective way. "We're getting the best doctors," he said, voice shaking. "Money isn't a barrier. Nothing is." He stayed up all night researching specialists. He held my hand in the hospital waiting room. And when the doctor finally came in the next morning and said the words, "It's not cancer. It's chronic ITP. Treatable." I collapsed. Daniel caught me. Literally caught me. In that moment, the contract didn't matter anymore. I wasn't thinking about money or the arrangement or the ticking clock of our 1-year deal. I was thinking about how Daniel hadn't left my side for a second. About how Liam reached for him during blood draws. About how Daniel whispered, "I've got you," over and over like he meant it. And he did. That night, after Liam fell asleep, I found Daniel in his office staring out at the city, the lights reflecting in his glass. I thanked him. He shook his head. "Don't thank me," he said softly. "I care about him. About you. More than I planned to." My heart stopped. Then he turned, stepped closer, and said the words that would permanently upend everything. "I'm in love with you, Jenna. And I don't want this to end when the contract does." I didn't speak. Not because I didn't know the truth. But because I did. I'd fallen for him, too. But saying it out loud felt like stepping onto a cliff with no railing. He raised a hand as if to calm the storm in my head. "You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know." But I did know. And I couldn't keep lying to either of us. So I told him the truth. "Daniel. I'm falling in love with you, too." He froze, as if he needed to replay the words before he believed them. Then he kissed me, softly, like he was afraid I'd disappear. Of course, right then, Liam appeared in the doorway wearing dinosaur pajamas. Is Daniel my real dad now? He asked. Daniel knelt down and said, only if you want me to be. Liam flung himself into Daniel's arms like he'd been waiting his whole life for someone to choose him. And that was the moment I realized our fake marriage had turned into the most real thing I'd ever had. 6 months later, we remarried, properly, at the Silverton courthouse, surrounded by real friends, real vows, and real love. Daniel cried. Not loudly. Just enough that Liam patted his cheek and said, "It's okay, Dad." Dad. Not Daniel. Not the fancy man. Dad. When we stepped out into the sunlight as an actual, chosen family, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Victory. Not over someone else. But over life. Over the world that had underestimated me, pushed me, broken me, then dared me to get up again. And I did. But here's the thing. I know this story sounds like a fairy tale. I know people will say I got lucky or married rich. But they didn't see the nights I cried myself to sleep. They didn't hear the doctors whispering terrifying possibilities. They didn't feel the panic of choosing safety for your child over pride. So here's the ending no one sees coming. I still don't know if what my father did was unforgivable. Or if it was the disaster that saved our lives. And I still don't know whether fate brought Daniel to my doorstep. Or if we were just two broken people who needed each other at the exact same time. Maybe both. Maybe neither. But that's the thing about stories like this. Everyone has an opinion. So I want you to tell me. Was my father a villain for signing that contract, or did his terrible decision accidentally give us a future we never would have had? And do you think relationships that start from chaos can ever truly be real? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm ready for the debate.